So you want a Focus ST? Well, it's a base level performance car, it gets you into that enthusiast market, and the numbers from factory are pretty decent. And on top of all that, the aftermarket support for this car is essentially endless. But here's a few things that nobody tells you about the Focus ST. Let's start off with the exterior of this car. First impressions are, it's a decent looking hatchback. Looks good, some high quality headlights, it's got all the fancy sport blacked out grills, and some 18-inch wheels. But let's take a closer look. When you get up close on a Focus ST, you're gonna notice some problems with the panel gaps. If you look closely, you can see the panel gap has a bit of space at the top, right? Nothing out of the ordinary. But as we come down the line, it's jammed right up against the fender by the time you get to the bottom. Now you might not think this is something to worry about at first glance, but where you run into problems is that the areas of these panel gaps that are jammed right up against the next panel over start to slowly rub on the paint, and eventually it will chip the paint off this quarter panel. And where you're missing paint, you're gonna find rust. Another area where you'll run into fitment issues is on the front headlights. They seem to sit a bit too tight up against your front quarter panel, and once again it's gonna rub the paint, chip the paint, and you're gonna have a bad time. The most notorious area for paint chipping and panels rubbing on the Focus ST is between the rear bumper and rear quarter panel. Right in here, the bumper is usually jammed right up against that quarter panel, and because of the design of this bumper, it catches the wind and it slightly vibrates. Nothing you'd ever be able to really catch on camera or see with your eye, but it slowly vibrates that quarter panel, and of course, the paint chips off. Other common problem areas are on the fitment of the trunk on either corner. These occasionally run into the bumper. I haven't had that issue, but I have seen it on a lot of different STs. Ford's paint is not very strong. And as you can see, this bumper is just full of tiny pits and rock chips just from normal everyday driving. I know all cars are gonna get rock chips on the front bumper, but these cars seem to take it extremely rough. I just popped the hatch open just to give you guys another example of the poor quality of Ford's paint. And these two screws hold on the wing. And if you look closely, around the edges of these screws that, mind you, have never been removed, the paint is actually wearing away underneath the screw. Now, if that doesn't say fitment problems and paint issues, I don't know what does. Now moving to the interior, we'll start off with these seats that everyone loves to praise the ST for. And don't get me wrong, these seats definitely deserve some praise. They're extremely comfortable, they hold you very well for a stock seat, and honestly, I can't really complain about them. But if I had to pick something, it would be this. Did you hear that? That little cracking? That's an issue with some rails that run underneath the seat, and basically the fasteners on these rails don't hold quite tight enough, and they end up making a clicking, cracking noise over time. I have heard of fixes for this, but the problem is you shouldn't have to. Next on the interior gripes, and thankfully the final interior gripe, we're going to talk about the infotainment system. Now, this system is actually a pretty fantastic system. I don't really have any complaints about it. Some people complain about the speaker quality, but personally, it seems fine. The issue I want to talk about is the fact that if you don't update this system, like go out of your way, connect it to Wi-Fi, and update it, eventually it'll just kind of glitch out and not work properly anymore. Which is something you would think they would just, I don't know, code in like an internal timer, like after 2 years, tell the user to update it. I don't know, something simple like that, instead of it just basically crapping its pants. Now, back to the exterior and onto the powertrain. The ST comes stock with 252 horsepower and 275 wheel torque, which feels amazing. Honestly, in a front-wheel drive hatchback from factory, it's pretty damn good. Now, tuning this car and just unleashing that little bit more of front-wheel drive rage gives this car like the perfect balance for its layout. But the problem I have is with the fuel system and the tuning from factory. So the first problem we're going to talk about is with the fuel system. And you might have heard there's a couple recalls out for this car right now. And it has to do with the fuel system. Basically, the vacuum lines cause the stock fuel tank to slowly bend and warp due to suction. Ford's solution for this was basically, hey, we'll give you a recall eventually, but for now, just keep half a tank of fuel in the car, like at all times, minimum. Which, when you have a 40-liter tank and 252 horsepower, you go through half a tank pretty quick. And not only did the first recall for the fuel system not work, there's now a recall for that recall. So even if you had the recall done, you're gonna be going in again. So good luck. Now we can talk about the stock tuning on this car. The stock tune is horrible. There's stumbling issues when you do things like turn the AC on, and occasionally it'll just stumble for no goddamn reason. Like, you start it, pull it out of your driveway, and go back inside to grab something, and you come back out to your ST slowly jumping from about 800 to 1500 RPM for no reason, just because. Another really annoying thing about the stock tune is that there's a shift light in the dash. Now you might be thinking, oh sweet, a shift light, so when you get to the top of the RPM range, it flashes so you shift? No, this is a fuel economy shift light. So when you're just, driving the car on the stock tune, it wants you to shift up basically every 10 kilometers an hour. So by 60 kilometers an hour, it wants you to sit in 6th gear, which if you know anything about driving manual in a city, that's really annoying. And yeah, you can just not shift, but then you have this light looking at you with angry eyes in the dash. Now on the positive side, that gives you a really good excuse to get yourself a tuner, which changes things like the shift light doesn't come on until a later RPM, and it fixes a lot of the stumbling issues. Surprisingly, these cars run much better as far as drivability goes after you change the tune to something aftermarket, which, when you think about it, is pretty silly that Ford couldn't come up with a better driving tune from factory than the aftermarket. Now I know this might seem like a 5 things I hate about my Focus ST video, but in reality it's not. It's not 5 nitpicky things that I've just chosen to not like about the ST. These are things that affect STs across the board. And if you own an ST or if you're looking at an ST, you need to know about these problems because the odds are they're gonna affect you in some way or another. And yeah, I can already see the comments. Well, if you wanted better quality, you should have bought something better. I get it. But you gotta understand, this is the ST. This is the line that Ford is pushing in their future vehicles with the Explorer ST and the Edge ST. But the thing is, when you set the baseline kinda low, you're not keeping the customers around that paid a premium for the sport trim. Alright guys, thanks for listening to my little rant, and thanks for watching the video. If you want more content like this, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, whatever you wanna do. And yeah, I get it. I'm lucky to own what I own. I love my ST, but these are issues that no one seems to talk about when you're in the market looking to buy one, and I just thought maybe I can help 1 or 2 of you out when you're looking at a car. Now, do I regret buying my Focus ST? No, because the price point on these cars and the performance you get definitely outweighs the issues. And there are some preliminary measures you can take, like ways to avoid the paint chipping and things like that, and getting the car tuned, which I was going to do no matter what. And so honestly, these issues aren't that big of a deal, and don't let it stop you if you have your heart set on a Focus ST. Just understand that they're issues and they might come up, and when they do, I just don't want you to be surprised. And on that note guys, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.